A very good afternoon to you, Stephen. Yes, indeed. Today we got an opportunity to really get some insights in terms of what was exactly happening and the conversations that were taking place, in the corridors of the highest office of the South African Police Service when the minister on the 31st of December 2024, made that announcement or distributed that letter where he was calling for the disbandment of the political killings task team, and of course the shock and the events and the confusion and chaos that followed that letter that was written by the suspended Minister Senzo Mchunu. So we had today one of the people who was at the center of ensuring that that vision or that instruction from the minister was brought into reality. We're talking about someone who has all the necessary experience when it comes to counterintelligence, intelligence itself, but also someone who grew within the ranks of the South African Police Service. So this is someone who was really vested with the knowledge and all the operations of the SAPS. But what came out in summary of her testimony today was the fact that, well, it seems as if, according to her testimony, the minister was not advised properly, and that the minister did not understand the extent of his decision. Because one of the things she's saying that, well, within the operations of the South African Police Service, there's no such thing as immediate disbandment. And she further explained why she's holding that position, saying that, well, if the minister is saying that, well, there must be an immediate disbandment, that will practically mean on the ground as officers or as leaders of operations on the ground, they will have to order their officers to down tools wherever they are, whether they're in KZN or Eastern Cape. So she was saying that, well, the minister was ill-advised and that letter was unfortunate, especially the wording, which included that point of immediate. So today the commissioners really pushed her and probed her to really explain what then happened after that and the several meetings that were held. So, Stephen, let's take a listen to Commissioner Madlanga, who's chairing this commission, where he started raising that point and seeking more clarity from the witness.
General, you speak about the winding down approach and the directive speaks about immediate disbandment. Where does the winding down approach come from?
In one of the things that I mentioned, I think at the end of my statement, is that we also need to orientate the political principles on how we work. There's no immediacy to ending a project. If you say it ends now, it means I'm saying to the colleagues, where you are, just drop everything and go back to your respective environments. We are talking here cases that involve victims of crime, where people's lives were lost. So we need to be considerate and thoughtful. Maybe it's just words in writing or it's English, but in terms of how we implement, we had to be cognizant of what becomes the reality towards winding down.
So General Senthumule went further, Stephen, to really paint the picture when it comes to the confusion, when it comes to the communication, in terms of how the operators on the ground or the officials on the ground will have to carry out those operational, instructions on the ground. So there was also an issue of communication between, the leadership of the SAPS. By the leadership, I mean General Khumalo, who is heading the intelligence division, but also General Sibiya, who is the Deputy National Commissioner responsible for detective work. The witness painted a picture of mistrust between these officials, because it seems as if General Sibiya did not trust General Khumalo when it comes to ensuring that the instruction of the minister was carried through. And to some extent, she made mention of the fact that Sibiya was of the view that Khumalo and Senthumule, who was a witness today, were not really delivering or were not adhering to the instruction of the minister. And of course, that's when Senthumule, who was the witness today, further explained that, it is very, very important for the political heads to really be familiar with the processes of the South African Police Service, but also made mention of several task teams in which a decision had been taken to disband them. But, those officials on the ground would encourage leaders at the national office in terms of there must be some members of a particular task team that are retained in that team. So that they can conclude their investigations, because it will be very problematic for a particular detective who's handling a case to then just be asked to abruptly hand over that investigation to a new member, to a new detective who's not familiar. So let's take a listen again to Major General Senthumule. She further explains her points, but also her testimony regarding the issue of understanding the processes of the South African Police Service when it comes to dealing and handling issues that relate to task teams.
I'm asking you this in the context of the minister's decision to disband the PKTT, which I understand to be a decision that had far-reaching implications. So I find it very odd that at a stage when the minister was still orientating himself, he could have taken such a decision. Do you wish to comment on that?
My comment is, I think your assessment is correct, but also to further add, I don't think maybe he anticipated that actually this had far-reaching implications. I'm not sure whether it was a lapse in judgment from his advisors or where it came from. But I don't think it was properly applied, and that's why today we are sitting here.
So overall, Stephen, her testimony really gave the commissioners a picture of what were the reasons for having those dockets being moved from KZN to Pretoria, and how then they needed to be returned to the province. She was saying that her primary understanding of why those dockets were moved to Johannesburg or to Pretoria, it was for handover processes. However, the commissioners, reflected and referenced previous witness statements who came here and said that those dockets were brought to Pretoria to be audited. She refuted and rebutted that statement, saying that, well, there is no way that dockets can be audited at a national office, because dockets, by their nature, according to SAPS processes, belong to police stations, and indirectly the person who's responsible for overseeing the investigations of any task team are the provinces. So that's when then she also introduced the fact that, well, she was shocked that, and actually she went further stating that, she discovered that General Mkhwanazi, who is responsible for policing in KZN as a commissioner, was deliberately sidelined, saying that it can never be that her or the national office can do anything with the dockets or disband without involving a provincial commissioner. So those are the key things that came out of her testimony very, very strongly. They're condemning the fact that provinces must be involved, specifically provincial commissioners, but also in her closing, saying that it is becoming a serious challenge having political executives, in this case ministers and other members of the executive, being too involved in operational matters, saying that that exposes the operations or the heads of operations to political exposure, meaning that now there must be a distinction between, or the lines must be drawn between members of the executive and the actual operational heads on the ground. Going further to state that she is asking the National Commissioner to protect people on the ground, especially the heads of divisions, from political exposure. So that's the summary of what came out of today's testimony at the Madlanga Commission in Pretoria, Stephen.
Thank you very much indeed, Ziniko, for that. Ziniko Mhlaba, of course, at the Madlanga Commission for you today.